Video today is around my lab, which is here. I've just put ESXi in. The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that it's ESXi 5.1. This was because of a small incompatibility issue with the host I was running 7 on, so I had to back off to 5.1 because that's the only one it accepts. One day I'll make enough money to be able to afford a decent host. But basically it's going to be around creating the zones, networks and rules for these subnets. So building the server test, environment out, the offensive hosts and the monitoring hosts. Basically what this will allow me to do is to test and demonstrate and experiment with things like zone protection, DDoS protection, protecting between hosts, SSL decryption between hosts, forward proxy and reverse proxy on the Palo Alto Firewall, and so on basically. So without further ado, let's get started. So beginning with the zone creation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a zone for this environment here, which is going to be on VLAN 200, as you can see. So beginning with VLAN 200, which is going to be our server test VLAN, I'm going to go and create the zones. Zones, everything on a Palo is passed through from zone to zone. That's how it determines where the packet's got to go. And as you can see, we've already got ESXi here for our management zone. So we're going to create it. We're going to call it the server test zone, because that makes sense to keep everything contiguous. It is a layer 3 zone because we're going to put a DHCP server on it. It's going to have an IP address. It's not a VLAN. Okay, and we've got no interfaces at the minute, so don't need to worry about that too much. Okay, so our next one is going to be our offensive hosts. Going to use that to store things such as Kali, Ubuntu that's got attacking tools on it and things like that. Anything that is malicious in nature, or vulnerable machines as well, so it can be monitored and it can be correctly controlled, because I don't want vulnerable machines accessible anywhere. So this is going to be our offensive machines. Again, it's a layer 3. But I've done that wrong. Offensive hosts, yes. So we'll go back and change that. Offensive hosts. Then got monitoring hosts and logging hosts. Okay. Monitoring hosts, layer 3 again. And logging hosts, layer 3. So for monitoring hosts will be things like, okay, so the monitoring host is going to be for experimenting with things like Nagios, Zabbix, PRTG, SolarWinds, anything like that. The logging will be for Splunk, Greylog, that sort of thing. And basically, by creating the extra zones and the extra interfaces, it gives us the ability to control the access to and from and the security to and from a lot more cleanly and using the zero trust model, so we can evaluate the traffic based on everything that's behind that interface. Okay, so now the interfaces, I'm going to create sub interfaces. So we click on this one because this is where our ESXi goes into. Add the sub interface in its own time. Alright, so for the interface name, this can actually be whatever you want. However, the idea of making that something different to what the tag actually is just would confuse matters. So we're going to do our server test one first, which is going to be 200. So 200. I say again, that can be whatever you want, and that is going to be the server test VLAN. The tag is the important thing. That has to match on both sides because that's what defines the tag on the trunk port. It's got to be connected to the virtual router or a virtual router. It could be on a different one, obviously. I'm going to connect it to our zone. And for this, I'm going to give it an IP address. Now there's loads of ways of giving different IP addresses, but one of the good things about Palo is you can do it all in sequence as you go. So server test gateway, it's going to be 10.0. What is my server? It's 200.1/24. Okay, and that gives us that, and that will push that object at the same time. Management profile for the minute is going to be ping only, just so that it knows that it's there. And then that's our sub interface connected on that trunk pool. Okay, so I'll just quickly do the others. Mark. So the next thing to do then is I want the IP addresses on my server VLANs and my ESXi VLANs. I want them to be dynamically allocated because I'm lazy. So we'll go for this one first, which is 200 is the server test. Okay, so the mode auto enabled, ping it, add an IP pool, 10.0.211 to 10.0.200.254. Okay, there's no reserved addresses because I don't need any reserved addresses. Lease, we'll do a lease of 8 hours. Days 8 hours because we don't necessarily want it to be. I don't want infinite leases. 200.1, which is my gateway. Subnet mask is 255.255.255.0, and the primary DNS is 8. No need necessarily to go for other DNS because I'm not that fast. Okay, and now we see we've got that there. We'll do the same again for 201. So 201 enabled. The pool is 10.0.201.11 because I want it to start from 11, so reserving the first 10 IP addresses. 4, time it again, 0, 8, and then ping before I allocate. Okay, so I'll set the rest of these up, and then I'll go back and do that one properly as well. I've got to do that now because that was just silly. 10.0.01.1 subnet mask is 255.255.255.0, so it's a /24, and good old Google for the first one for the DNS. Okay, so I'll go and do the rest, and then I'll catch you over at the rules. So now we need to create our rules, because we want our hosts to be able to get out onto the internet. This is going to be server test internet access. It's a universal rule because it's not an intrazone or an interzone, although I mean it is an interzone rule, but the majority of the rules you put in now are going to be universals. So it's ESXi server test hosts to internet. Source is going to be server test, any source address, any user. Destination zone is going to be outside because it's going outside. Application any. Service category any, because what we're going to do is we're going to lock it down later. At the minute, actions allow and log. Okay, and that has gone in there. So the problem with that is that interzone is going to get dropped. So we need to move this. We can actually move it that way if we want. So I might stick it there. Okay, so that's from server test outside. Now, of course, it can go outside, but if we look at our NAT rules, we'll see that we don't have that zone in there, so that needs adding, which we can do here. There, add server test zone. Okay, so now we've got our rules. We've got our NAT rule. We've got a DHCP set up. Under here, DHCP. So technically speaking now, when I next fire up this Win10 box, which is here, it should be able to retrieve a IP address and it should have internet access. So I'll push policy on this, or commit, sorry, not push policy, checkpoint terminology there, and we'll come back afterwards and we can see if it's worked. Okay, and so we can see from here that we have an IP address, and we can see on here on 200 use allocation, and that's it, it's there. Okay, and we go back to here, get rid of that because I don't want it here, and we should now be able to surf the web. Accept. And there we go. So now we're running. We've connected all our trunk ports. We've connected to the internet through here, which means we've got our IP address through DHCP, and now we can start to fine tune and create security. So the next one will be, the next video will be about the zone protection profiles. We'll do a demonstration on how the zone protection profiles work and the difference that they make. So get a web server up, and go in and start to attack it with an instance of Kali or something like that, and show how we can stop the reconnaissance phase of the attack chain. Okay.